Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today on today's episode of Homeroom with Education Leaders. Those of you who have joined us before may realize that we have retitled the series, so please just keep that in mind for future episodes when you're looking for information. We know you all have really incredibly busy schedules, and there's so much going on right now, so we really appreciate you taking the time to think about equitable educational opportunities for all students. I would like to thank all of our wonderful panelists, Superintendent Dixon of Utah, Superintendent Joan Eber of Nevada, Commissioner Michael Johnson of Alaska, and John Schnurr of Bloomberg Philanthropies. We know that for all of you, you're also incredibly busy right now, and so we really truly appreciate you taking the time to be here for these important discussions. Quick couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you've missed any of our past conversations, you can find them on our website. This includes full video as well as blog recaps of each of the webinars. I will give you an exact link at the end of the webinar. After our welcoming remarks, we'll hear from our panelists for about 30 minutes, just having a loose discussion. When you tweet about today's episodes, please use hashtag #EdHomeroom. You can also use that to follow along with other attendees. You may notice, once again, this is slightly different from other hashtags that we've had, so please just keep that in mind. I'd now like us to get started by asking the Hunt Institute's President and CEO, Dr. Jubaid Siddiqui, who's going to just provide some brief welcome remarks.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our distinguished set of panelists this afternoon. We know how extremely busy you all are during this unprecedented time, and we appreciate you taking time and the opportunity for us to have sit with you and interface with all of us this afternoon. As we move forward and respond to the many changes that are happening in our society, it will become increasingly important to make space for these types of conversations. Each session in this new series has focused on a different pressing topic that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. To allow all of us who are passionate about education and equity for all students to work towards collaborative and meaningful solutions. Our conversation today will focus on supporting college and career pathways during this period of remote learning. Many students are missing out, as you all know, on important steps along the path to college and career at this time. So we wanted to make sure we had a chance to sit down and discuss how states and districts and schools can support students in this as we move forward. That said, before I turn it back to Julia, I just want to say if there's anything we at the Hunt Institute can do to support our host of guests that are joining us, teachers, superintendents, principals, lawmakers from all over the country, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team. We stand ready to support you. Again, thanks for all that you do. And with that, Julia, I'll turn it back to you to get the program going.
Great, thanks so much, Jubaid. And so I'd like to kind of just jump right in, and we're going to start with John Schnurr, who is the lead outside advisor on education for Bloomberg Philanthropies. And John, from a national perspective, what are state and school leaders most struggling with as it relates to supporting students, not only who are transitioning into college and career, but also who are at that stage where they're really intentionally thinking about their future plans?
Well, first, huge thanks to the Hunt Institute for hosting this and for the superintendents, commissioners, and the participants in the call. This is such an intense and pivotal time for our country, and education and the role that education leaders play is just one of the most crucial things, both dealing with the pandemic and the issues of racism coming to the fore and building our future. And making time for this is an important moment for all the leaders that are gathered here. To be brief, and I'll come back in the discussion, I think we have in some ways, one manifestation of our current crisis is also an opportunity to think about how to accelerate the kind of improvement of transitions from high school to post-secondary. And just to state it, I do think the crisis, among others, is for the class of 20 and 21, even 22, the current graduating class and rising seniors in the next class, are graduating into the toughest economy and job market of our lifetime. And we know that. And I think you all know, but it's worth emphasizing, the research is very clear that from previous recessions, that those who are new entrants to the labor market and new coming into recessions have been at lower employment and earnings for the long term. a couple years of difference makes a decades-long difference for people and for the economy. And we also now have 25% of our graduating seniors, and we'll see next year, who are reconsidering their college plans in light of what's happening. So having kind of bold, and many are doing this, strategies for how to better support those classes are key. At the same time, I think the kind of strategies that can be put in place help accelerate how do we think some of the most cutting edge efforts that many of you are trying, but I think no one has really got this at scale or systemic, how to create a new transition, given that high school used to be a ticket to a middle class lifestyle, and now by itself is a ticket to jobs. 4 specific things I'll just mention, and I'll come back more in the discussion. One, I think that really investing in high quality credit-bearing courses for advising and preparation, both for college and careers, that students are getting really good experiences in class and from advisors how to think about their college and career options is important. And people do some of that, but making that systemic for juniors and seniors between class time and advising is one opportunity. Second opportunity is really thinking about what some of you are, the interstitching between high school and post-secondary, how to make that transition smoother, including like fast track post-secondary credits in high school, 13th grades, articulation agreements. People are trying out automatic enrollment in some cases between end of high school and college, but how do you make that more seamless in terms of the experience between high school and post-secondary? Third, there is a need right now for people who may be thinking about maybe not going to college, for expanding opportunities for service, but coupled with higher education, where people can take service roles, but where they're earning, kind of making progress toward higher education. And fourth, I'll just mention right now is just this summer, I know you all are dealing with this, we've got a graduating class that lost a lot of support at a key time. I know people are working on this, but how right now to make sure that we are tracking where those students are going and giving them summer opportunities. And then to close my own opening comments, I would just say the opportunity, I think, for states and school systems is to think about, moving forward, how do we track and take responsibility for the success of high school students post-high school? Right now, high school is responsible for graduation. Others are responsible for picking up. We really don't have yet a system where we're saying, you know what, let's actually have data on and a system trying to identify where every student's going, college, careers, and make sure we're taking responsibility, learning from that data, how to improve the post-high school outcomes of our high school seniors and graduates.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's such a great brief overview. Thank you. And so next we're going to start with Superintendent Joan Eber, the Superintendent of Public Instruction for Nevada. And Superintendent, can you discuss what your state is doing to approach these issues that have been really exacerbated by COVID-19? And what is Nevada doing right now and thinking about long-term in relation to intentional college and career pathways?
Great. So thank you again, like the other panelists, the Hunt Institute, for bringing us all together on this conversation. So in Nevada, we're taking a long-term approach in our response to the COVID because the pandemic, we know, will forever change the way we're doing business. And additionally, the pandemic has opened up our opportunities to make the meaningful changes we need to close the equity gaps that increase our outcomes. In Nevada, we have a path forward plan that we worked on, framework. It is inclusive of a safe return to school buildings. And it also has a large component devoted to Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative, which is inclusive of our higher education institution. And it's building out that base of education at the state level with content and resources, professional development, support for families. So in the short term, the Office of Career Readiness, Adult Learning and Educational Options, which we call CRALEO with dear love, they've been reviewing all of our career and technical education programs of study and work-based learning opportunities. CRALEO has also been collaborating with the Governor's Office on Workforce Innovation, which is critical. They have many dollars and resources available through this crisis as well. Our Nevada System of Higher Education, the Governor's Office of Economic Development to ensure our alignment between our career pathways and college career post-COVID workforce needs. In Nevada, it's important to assure our students have access and opportunity to explore the career pathways in our Nevada economy now and ensure that they have access to high skill, high demand jobs in areas which include our healthcare technology, advanced manufacturing, We have a huge growth also in logistics and operations. So it's extremely important as the state begins its economic recovery from the COVID-19 shutdown, that COVID-19 has already had a significant impact on our economy, but that we continue to provide the resources and services, and that as we move forward, we diversify where we're at as a state. So I'll pause there. I know we have our other colleagues moving in, but that's a quick overview for Nevada.
Thank you so much. And yes, moving along quickly, we will go to Superintendent Sydney Dixon from Utah. And Superintendent, can you also talk a bit about how Utah is approaching this question of supporting students on their pathway to college and career, especially in these really unique circumstances?
I would be happy to. Thanks so much for having me. I would just echo what has already been said by both our great guests, and echo Superintendent Eber's, her comments around the challenges of leaning into COVID. So we really started imagining what it could look like in the fall while we were dealing with the essentials of making sure kiddos were fed, they would graduate on time, that our classified staff could continue to be employed, that education was continuing, and we were meeting social and emotional needs of our students and staff. Those were 5 essential in what we were calling our new now, because there was nothing normal about what we were experiencing in COVID spring. As we moved into the summer, thinking about our kiddos specifically in the areas of CT&E, where they were able during a normal school year to really engage in being completers and concentrators in the career and technical education space, and having rich and robust work-based learning experiences and completing industry certifications. So we knew that there was some unfinished learning in that space, and we're happy in our state that we can re-engage with some of those experiences. But as Joan talked about, we also had some opportunities to really reimagine what that could look like. So while it wasn't perfect, there were a lot of digital opportunities. We had the benefit of a very robust digital teaching and learning initiative, and we were able to turn around our continuance of learning in just a couple of days and get digital devices out into the homes of all of our students. So that part we had down, and our teachers knew how to use those tools in the classroom, but flipping into a remote setting was more challenging when you're thinking about the hands-on experiences with career and technical education. So our teachers became very clever at thinking about how to use things around the house to teach the same standards that would normally be in the course, and to have things like digital job shadows and career exploration and virtual networking and recorded interactions between adults and students. So all of those things went on, and they have room for improvement, but it has been mentioned, it really opened up a window for us to reimagine. And then last but not least, just thinking about how we work more seamlessly with our partners. We're lucky in that we have these structures in place already, where we have great partnerships with our industry partners in advisory groups for all of our pathways. We have a Utah Talent Ready system that brings everybody together. We have a governor that leans into career and technical education, and an amazing workforce. So we've got all the right conditions in place as we reimagine now how we rethink work-based learning in some of these places that might be challenging for all of our kids to continue to earn their certifications in CTE.
Thank you so much. And then moving on to Commissioner Johnson, the Commissioner of Education and Early Development for Alaska. Commissioner, can you discuss how distance learning and the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted Alaska's effort for strong college and career pathways? And how are you approaching this right now and thinking about it in the long term?
Oh, thank you, Julia, and thank you to all the folks at the Hunt Institute for hosting this. Thank you to Governor Hunt. Appreciate the opportunity and appreciate all the work that the Hunt Institute does, even when there's not a pandemic. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, and thanks to my fellow panelists. So I'll start with a little bit of history. In 2017, the state board worked with a very diverse group of Alaskans on a project called Meeting Alaska's Education Challenge. Based on NAEP scores, we rank at the very bottom of the country, particularly in reading. The fruit of those efforts has endured, and because it involved so many stakeholder groups, it will continue to be our guide toward intentional and very deliberate pathways that are equitable. The 5 priorities of that effort were: 1, to support all students to read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. Secondly, and relevant to this discussion, is to increase career, technical, and culturally relevant education to meet student and workforce needs. The 3rd priority was to close the achievement gap by ensuring equitable education rigor and resources. One of those ways would be through tribal compacting and chartering, which I'll talk about a little bit more. 4, prepare, attract, and retain effective education professionals. And 5, improve the safety and well-being of students through partnerships with families, communities, and tribes. Through that effort, the board established its mission. The board's mission is an excellent education for every student, every single day. It's short, but it's very clear, no equivocations. Since then, school districts have built their own strategic plans around these priorities, as well as legislation and other efforts that have taken place. The department has published a new data center, and we focused our grant writing on those 5 priorities. It's really about focus. There are many programs and strategies and ideas out there, but to be most effective, we are focusing the collective energy on those 5 priorities. In terms of where we're going, COVID-19 is a pandemic. It's not a new mission statement. We may have to adjust some of our activities, but not our vision and goals. So the state board, our educators, our education partners remain focused on this work, particularly to increase career, technical, and culturally relevant education opportunities to meet student needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And thank you to everyone for those really great intro comments. We're going to start now. We're going to do a quick round of questions, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. So please feel free to submit those into the Q&A, and we will try to get through as many of them as we can, and we will be happy to answer as many of them as possible. So for our first question, I'm going to start with John again. And John, junior year of high school is a really critical year for students. It's when students really begin solidifying their post-high school plans. They go on college visits, they do summer learning opportunities, and they start with those college admissions tests. And so what are some of the challenges that schools and states are really facing right now in trying to support students and still in gaining those opportunities when they don't have them accessible in the way they normally would have, and what's being done to really rectify that struggle?
It's a great question, Julia. And obviously, all of us in education face so many challenges and opportunities, as has been said. But I do think you're right that in addition to the graduating seniors, which presents a very particular type of crisis and opportunity, needs all ages, early learning throughout in this times. 11th, the rising juniors do represent a particular challenge and need. At a time when we're likely to have budget cuts, I assume in most places that people are on the phone from. We've got the hybrid learning situations where a lot of people will be in and out of school, and we may have other waves of the virus. We've got the understanding of the implications of race issues and race equity gaps that are where our kids of color and our low-income kids are the furthest behind. And we're at a time where the economy is in a difficult spot when already the jobs were changing in ways that education was struggling to adapt. So it's like several challenges being faced. So I do think thinking about, and there are districts all over the country, including this call, thinking about how to actually prepare the rising juniors for success post-high school. Having a clear 2-year strategy for that is really important. I think in terms of some of the innovations we're seeing, I think that looking at the right kind of online programming and hybrid programming, both academic programs connected to college, programming CTE programs we mentioned connected to credentials, and career and college planning are all crucial. And how to, wherever people can be adapting the best programs that are hybrid in each of those areas for juniors and seniors is key. The nonprofit Propel has got a really interesting year-long course right now for career planning, and there are a lot of good college curricula as well. I also think that the advising function, which is so underinvested on in so much of the country, really is key too. And anything we can do to make sure that as people are thinking about staffing, what's available staffing, to really systematically look at how every junior is getting support from an advisor, maybe even with teachers who are not going to be coming to school for those who are elderly and or vulnerable? Are there ways to leverage people for the advising function there? But really think about fast ways to reinvent and expand the advising function. And I will say that while there's lots of opportunity, the budget cuts and the challenge is going to make this hard. So thinking about having to make hard choices, but as you're making those choices, having one of your priorities being, what does the 2-year experience look like, and what does success 3 years from now look like for these rising juniors, will have as much implication and consequence for education as anything we can do over the next years.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we're gonna move on to a quick question for Superintendent Ebert. And Superintendent Ebert, can you talk a bit about the CARES Act funding that states are receiving, and how do you anticipate that some of this funding might be used to support college and career pathways in the wake of COVID-19? And how are you thinking about that in your state?
So we're leveraging these funds in both allocational and a competitive methodology. I worked very closely with our superintendents across the state with, what really are the needs. We know that every state is different, and then every school district is different. And so those dollars will be allocational and then also competitive. As I mentioned previously, with COVID, we've built upon our strengths and weaknesses. And so I already mentioned the Digital Learning Collaborative, but what I'd like to do is give you another example in that way is the race and equity gaps that existed prior to COVID. And quite frankly, the lack of access and expectation for some of our students. So just 3 years ago, not even that long ago, half of our school districts did not offer any advanced placement courses. And we know that when the expectation and access is there to high quality materials and educators, that we can move this entire nation. And so what that meant is that we needed to, as a State Department of Ed, support and shift the districts. And some of our districts are extreme rural. We have one district that is over 18,000 square miles, but the district itself has just over 5,000 students. So using technology to close that gap, we worked collaboratively with our largest school district in the state, made sure that their educators were made available to our most rural areas, as well as the content and curriculum. And so we're also working with our higher education institution to expand that now to make sure that all of our students have access to college coursework, have access, and remotely to have access to create that equal opportunity.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. And then Superintendent Dixon, many students, particularly non-traditional students, may have had financial situations change for themselves or their families as a result of the layoffs that we've seen happen during COVID. And we're hearing that some of these students who thought they would have the financial means to attend college in the fall are now finding out that that might not be the case. And what is Utah doing in order to think about supporting those students in the fall and beyond to make sure that they have access to that post-secondary education?
Thank you, Julia. I just want to throw a little lightning on Joan's thunder. She was talking about gaps, equity gaps. And I think the thing that has been certainly magnified through all of this is thinking about the digital divide. We think about devices in our state as something that we were able to put out into homes. We even had broadband partners who provided discounted and free resources. But in some places, in corners and remote canyons of our state, you can't even ping a cell tower. So there are some access issues. But even beyond that, we have to start thinking of broadband as a utility. And when we think of it that way, it's just like electricity and water in our homes. And that provides a lot of access to our students in an affordable way, in that they can take concurrent enrollment courses, which are very affordable and popular in our state. We have legislation that has helped provide funding for AP exams, et cetera, for our most vulnerable students. So we have some mechanisms in place, but if we don't have broadband and that equitable condition in our homes, then our students can't take advantage of those situations. Libraries were closed, places where they would normally access online learning. And we are a state, we are Silicon Slopes, so we are a state that really believes in digital opportunities for students. So during this time, we've partnered with our tech colleges. I know they've been working in virtual, with virtual reality and augmented reality for work-based learning. But I so appreciate in our state that our higher education partners, our tech colleges, our governor, everybody who has received any CARES Act funding, they are very targeted in making sure that students who are learning English, students who live in conditions of poverty, students who were on that trajectory to go to college or a tech college still has the opportunity to do so. So we're all using all of our funds to target the places where it's needed most. And also our largest college is our Salt Lake Community College. It's an amazing school that provides a lot of opportunities and continues on the pathways along with our tech colleges and universities all over the state. So they're actually working on some micro credentials as well to link kiddos in an affordable way that will help them stay linked into that college or tech campus.
Thank you. It's really great information. And I just want to remind all of our attendees that if you have any questions, please feel free to send those in. And we are making great time today, so I think that we'll be able to get through a lot. Moving on to Commissioner Johnson. Throughout this webinar series that we've been putting on, we've heard a lot of state leaders express that they're seeing a lot of opportunity to create a more equitable education system as a long-term result of everything that's happening right now, the pandemic, as well as a lot of the societal unrest that we're seeing. Do you see any similar opportunities when it comes to rethinking college and career pathways, and what might those changes look like?
Yeah, thank you. And I too will just echo what my fellow state chiefs have said about connectivity and devices and the digital divide. All those things certainly exist in Alaska, and because of our geography, some of those are significant challenges, but in order to pandemic-proof our school year, those are things that we're going to have to deal with. And answering a question about college and career pathways, I think this pandemic will change the job market. We're going to have to approach it in a humble way. It'll create new jobs. It'll increase the need for some of existing jobs. So we just need to be humble in that we don't yet know the degree to which pathways will need to change and develop. We just need to be willing to do that. In Alaska, a couple of things in terms of changes to college and career pathway. As I mentioned before, the conversations around tribal compacting and chartering is an opportunity to rethink even what college and career pathways mean. The system for far too long in Alaska has defined college and career from a Western-centric perspective. We have students growing up in cultures that are rich in subsistence lifestyles, that are far off the grid, and that are connected to the land and nature in ways that non-Indigenous people may not understand. Tribal compacting is an opportunity to respect that subsistence living. The Indigenous lifestyles are no less purposeful than college and career, but the post-secondary and life's work are defined in very different terms. So tribes have the right to define those learning and work terms. The pandemic, again, is not our mission, but it does and should intensify our core mission. As we plan for the 2021 school year, there are and will remain many uncertainties. What we're trying to do is to make teaching and learning certain, regardless of all the other variables. Teachers want to teach, students need to learn. The entire effort of planning for next year is to outmaneuver COVID-19 to keep a space for teaching and learning to happen, even if the classroom isn't available on a daily basis for each student.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all those really insightful answers. I think that a lot of really interesting points have brought up, and I know that it really seems like you're making a lot of great strides towards addressing student needs right now. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. Moving on to some of our questions from our attendees, and once again, please feel free to send some of those in. As you're thinking about these college and career pathways, are you doing any work to track or evaluate the school and district engagement with students and families as it relates to college and career? And what does that work look like, particularly from an equity perspective? And I think for this question, we'll go ahead and start with Superintendent Eber and then also Superintendent Dixon after that.
Great, thank you. So I want to give first a huge shout out to my colleagues, and I love the outmaneuver comment. That being said, with conversations like this, we'll all be able to gain a better understanding. Your specific question regarding to tracking and trapping, what has transpired in this, our systems are not as robust as we would like them to be when we talk about the connectivity with higher ed. And this has created an environment where now more than ever our continuum for learning needs to transpire in the open communication within our state. I actually happened to meet with all of our superintendents this morning, and as we were making, having those conversations and giving our context, the connectivity is mentioned several times, has not been there. We know that's nationally and globally, but two, in some instances, it's even just by phone. And so building out those relationships, we know that we've had great success in those areas where we have, our rural areas where we have our community colleges, satellite, that they had great success with the majority of their students when they had already a relationship, a true relationship with, the students that were taking dual credit courses and such. And so, to the specific data components, we continue to collect those, but we know that we've had high success on some things, that you could have learned in kindergarten, right? Making sure that you're building out those relationships and partnerships as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Ebert. Yeah, I think I want to speak a little bit to that parent engagement piece. I think we've underestimated two things in our schools during this closure time for us, a soft closure where we went into a remote learning phase. And we saw some miracles really occur in terms of what our teachers were able to do and what our parents were able to do. And that triangulation of student, parent, and school, we know that's always been important, but I think we underestimated the communication pieces. So let's take that to the space of equity and think about our parents who don't speak English, our parents who may come from refugee status and just trying to even navigate school. And now we do it in a remote setting and there's really nobody face-to-face to talk to. So those are additional challenges. And then we are talking about pathways and trying to help families who may not have the means to send a child to college or even be thinking about it. And we're trying to talk to them about FAFSA and pathways that are digital and some virtual job shadowing and a lot of just terminology that might be so foreign. And then if you don't have broadband, so there are these great inequities, and that parent component is so important. I spoke with some high school principals this morning. We were talking about the underestimation of the social emotional part of learning and how that connection really supports academics. That's certainly true in the career, college and career readiness space as well, and thinking about career pathways and college pathways. So that fundamental piece of knowing that someone is there and cares for you and is trying to nudge you along that pathway is so critical. And that's something else we've underestimated. So we have an app that we use that tracks data. We also have, for the past, I don't know how many years, we've had a program called Utah Future. So there are ways where we can track engagement and we have industry built in so they can do some matching of job shadowing and those kinds of things. So we have that in place, but without that component of the home, school, and student connection, that trifecta of making sure everybody's together, it makes it even more difficult. So I think that's something that we want to lean into a little bit more. How do we make sure that we're not only tracking the work and the engagement, but really involving parents as such an important partner and letting them know about the possibilities, not just financially, but the dreams that their kids can have that can be actualized, and that they can walk out of high school having skills and knowledge that can help reduce costs and lead them right into a job market while they are able to engage in stackable credentials. COVID or no COVID, that should be happening.
Yeah, thank you. And those are really important points to remember, is, you know, all the different backgrounds that students are coming from, and making sure that we're being cognizant of that in all of our plans. And so I want to switch this one. I'm going to direct this one to John. And we're going to talk a little bit about advanced placement. So like, where do advanced placement courses and dual enrollment fit into state plans for college access? And how might they be impacted as we look towards the fall? And, you know, what are you seeing in this area?
It's a great question. In the crisis, there is opportunity, and we are seeing colleges that are accelerating partners with high schools to offer dual enrollment for selected high-quality online courses and programs, including this summer. The University of Northern Virginia Community College has got a free online college coursework that's being offered, including to high school juniors and seniors right now, and is looking at what's going to happen next school year. People are looking at online versions of AP, IB. I think that one of the superintendents underscored this. There already was a need for people across different sectors, parents for sure, but for higher ed, K-12 employers to figure out how to more stitch things together so there's more of a bridge from high school into both college and work. And there are programs that are going on in that. I think the need for that becomes even more dire in this context. So one of the things I think we're seeing at the best is where the community college, the K-12 system, employers can come together and say, all right, if we've got some targets here, like increase the number of students who are going to get actually college credit by the time they graduate, or increase the number of students who get valued career credentials by the time they graduate, or have a plan that actually reflects readiness for what the student wants to do post high school college careers. I think we're seeing that happen at best when those sectors, K-12, higher ed, employers are coming together and thinking about what are some goals and some ways of stitching together the student's experience across those three.
Thank you so much. And moving on to another question from the audience, and this is going to be for Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Johnson, I know that CTE is such a huge focus or large focus in Alaska. And so what is Alaska doing to support CTE educators in the move to remote learning, since it's usually such a hands-on topic?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And yeah, our governor is very focused on CTE, our legislature, our business community. Alaska lends itself to great opportunities in that regard. So, you know, there's lots of great things happening in our school districts. Like Superintendent Dixon said, you know, they've been doing some amazing work. One thing that we are doing at the state is we're working with several education partners, including the Teachers Association, Superintendents Association, tribal organizations, and looking at a statewide virtual platform. And so some of our teachers are very already engaged in a virtual platform and creating content, particularly around CTE. And so we're moving alongside that, going to try to make that statewide. And really, as I said before, provide a place for teaching and learning, regardless of all the other uncertainties that we don't know about. And by using a platform that a lot of teachers are already using, they're able to move in and out of a classroom, whether that's the physical classroom at their local school or in a virtual setting, and then working on the connectivity issues and all of that. Along with that, by having a common virtual platform, we're able to work with industry to develop some new pathways or some new courses on that platform, developed with industry, that will provide workers for the jobs that our industry needs now and in the future, based on how the pandemic's going to change how they do their work. And so this gives a common place for that teaching and learning to happen, and we'll be providing a lot of professional development around it to equip CTE teachers and others to teach in that space.
Thank you so much. And then I'm going to direct this one to Superintendent Dixon again, not because I'm picking on you, but because it's related to something you were talking about in your last answer. But we had a question about social emotional learning. And since this is something that you were mentioning, what strategies are you using to create more robust SEL opportunities, not only for students, but also for teachers and staff who have taken on a lot at this time as well?
You know, we're a state that didn't have a social worker in every school. We're still not there. We're very shy on school counselors, but our legislature really leaned in the last couple of years and provided funding. So we have more workers in the system than we've had before. And we've really looked at a variety of curricula. I have an amazing staff who are really dedicated specifically to social emotional learning, but we see it as part of a broader whole. We've developed a Utah Portrait of a Graduate, and part of that map includes essential learnings or essential skills that really are the very foundations of social emotional learning. And we feel like those transition well into the workplace, into society, into college. So really concentrating on what are those essential skills, not just creative thinking and problem solving, but self-regulation and all of those kinds of things that give our students purpose. So that, in fact, Utah MAP, the MAP stands for Mastery, Autonomy, and Purpose. And you can see how social emotional learning is embedded into all of those things. At the same time, we didn't let COVID slow us down. We pulled 120 educators together during May and really worked on competencies around all of these elements of Portrait of a Graduate. So we're trying to move forward with creating common vocabulary and understanding and really putting resources into providing our teachers a way forward, that we're not just reliant on specialists in our schools to do the work, but that our educators really create a culture and climate in their schools that just permeate social emotional learning in a very positive way through mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about all the work Utah is doing in that. And so I have a question now for Superintendent Ebert. Superintendent, in thinking about these career pathways that we're discussing, we know many schools partner with local businesses for CTE. It's already been mentioned, job shadowing, that sort of thing. And how are these, we've kind of touched upon this already, but getting into a little bit more detail, how are these important experiences being impacted by some of the limitations that we're seeing? And so Superintendent Ebert, I will have you answer this one, and then Commissioner Johnson, I'll have you do a little bit after that.
When the pandemic first hit, and we had to look at our students that were engaged in work-based learning, and quite frankly, we know the businesses were not accessible. We had to take a step back rather quickly and adjust. What is nice is that everyone did step up and look at what we can do. What we had to do, policy-wise, is there was a specific set number of hours that students were required to complete. So we actually had to work with the governor's office to make that shift, and we wanted it to be temporary as to not do harm to our students, especially those that were on a pathway to graduation with specific designations. We also worked with our vendors, competency-based, and having a terminal assessment or demonstration of success to shift so that there was online access. A lot of the assessments were you had to be in person. you had to demonstrate via a specific product. And so thinking differently, we still want the students to be able to demonstrate those competencies, but it doesn't have to be, you know, in the methodology that we were using over the last years. Our team met with our business partners actually this last week, and aligning and making sure that if we continue to have a hybrid learning environment, that the expectations are still met by our business partners, as well as higher education. So that's going really well. I'm excited about that. And then, as my colleague said earlier, making sure that we have a common platform across the state to be able to connect with our coursework, not only K-12, but higher education, and then to be able to leverage open educational resources from my colleagues in other states that they've developed. I think that this whole pandemic has brought all of us closer, and really an understanding of how to leverage all of the resources that we have and the best thinking for student and family success.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Johnson, anything to add there?
You know, I guess I would just say it's a great question, and one that's been very tough for Alaska. So a lot of our young folks get work-based experience in the tourism industry in the summer because who doesn't like to come to Alaska in the summer? Unfortunately, tourism really has come to a halt. All the cruise ships are not coming. And so many of those jobs just are not happening this summer. And so that those work-based experiences that were kind of part of the fabric went away very suddenly. And so we have a lot of work to do there. Our planning for the next school year, we made it a plan that it's modular. You can create it in modules so that different districts can use those modules as fits their community and their community sizes. We have some very large areas, but very small student population. The center of that is the continuity of learning, and so within that is thinking through all the elements of how to continue learning, including CTE learning. And that's not only in a distant delivered situation, but when many of the jobs and the work-based experiences went away, how can we shift that? And so we're having conversations with tribes, with industry and others to start answering those questions, but don't have a lot of answers yet.
Thank you. And then this one's going to be for John. You mentioned earlier the role of college advising in this situation. And so with so much uncertainty around higher education in the coming year, how do you see the role of college advising changing or rising to meet this new climate?
So, look, it's a more complicated environment than it's ever been. And students are grappling with questions around colleges that might be open but just online, and there's questions about given the economy about being able to go further from home, and there are financial challenges with kind of sorry about that, I just realized that wasn't on video. The financial challenges where colleges become less affordable in many cases. So the challenges are great, but what it does is it underscores more than ever the need for investing in really high quality personalized advising to help students make the right choices in very informed ways, and particularly to really plan out steps. Because I think that buffeted by all this information, I think it's easy for students to be back on their heels and not take steps, but say, all right, by when do I need to take certain steps? By when do I have to submit the FAFSA? By when do I have to think about what are the matched colleges that make sense to apply to? How do I consider the options? The need to help plan and monitor that and support students and make sure the students are making decisions based on good information, not just fear, is important. And I will tell you that I think some of those promising efforts out there are districts and states which are having 4-credit courses where students in a very systematic way are having the experience and planning for those courses, and where places our districts are making investments to make sure they're protecting the ratio for advisors. And there's some great nonprofits out there that are doing work. From College Point, backed by Bloomberg, is helping high achieving low income students across the country through several nonprofits, including College Possible and College Advising Corps and others. One Goal is another. There are local nonprofits, but really leveraging some best nonprofit expertise to supplement the advising in schools is another opportunity. But the main message here is, in this environment, decisions that students make in the next year or two will affect their lives for 50 years. So investing in the advising and support to help students make informed decisions that make sense for them and their families is crucial.
Thank you. Yeah, that's been very, very illuminating. And so I think for our last question, we're going to do a round robin and have all of our panelists do a quick answer. I'll kind of just call on you. And so this question, we've been trying to frame our last question on all these webinars, really looking forward and, thinking about some of the opportunities that we see coming out of everything that's going on. And so looking ahead in this space, what are your hopes for ways that we will see innovation in college and career readiness as we move forward from this pandemic? And so we'll start with Superintendent Ebert.
Thank you. So in light of not only the pandemic, but also the social unrest, it has really made us accelerate, and there's things that we've done and that we do well. The fact of the matter is we can't work any harder, but we can work differently. And in many aspects, having those conversations, open conversations about what we already know and how we can partner with business, industry, higher education, our government to make it happen. I wake up energized to think about our movement forward. There you go.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's a great answer. And we'll go to Superintendent Dixon now.
Thank you. I love what John said just a minute ago about the decisions that kiddos make in the next year will impact their lives for 10 years. I feel that way about our school system. It's why we're thinking about fall, not just in recovery, but recovering and reimagining. And that is a community effort. So reimagining what equity looks like and how we deal with that as a community, not just a school-based issue. Thinking about how we use technology in different ways. Getting away from seat time. Our school systems too often are still ruled by what I call the 3 Bs, buses, bells, and butt time or seat time. So getting away from that and thinking about competencies and essential skills and how we support those, monitor and teach those differently. So I too think we have this window in time to reimagine school systems that work for each and every student, not just for a particular subgroup of students, but for each student. And that comes into play with social emotional learning, arts and humanities, academic learning, and college career readiness, and making sure that as our students leave our system, that they've experienced something very different than you or I did, because we've been doing school the same way for far too many decades. And we have this wonderful opportunity to reimagine industry with our partners and reimagine school for kiddos.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I also am definitely going to steal the 3 Bs from you. Moving on, Commissioner Johnson, would you like to speak here?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for all my fellow panelists. What a great opportunity to hear the discussion today. My hope is that we use this challenge as an opportunity to communicate every day how much we value every single student. The pandemic, the social unrest, all of it is an opportunity to speak to our students and say we value every single one. We're not going to get out of either one of these challenges without our students. They really are the answer. So the pandemic, we need them to do well in school and go into careers as researchers, as organizers, as other leaders that will help solve this kind of problem for our nation. And so I see it as an opportunity to look every student in the face and say, you are really, really important to our future.
Yeah, thank you so much. I kind of wish we could have closed right with that, but I'm sure John will have also an equally great response. So John.
High bar, hard to top that, Commissioner. So what my hope is, the superintendent made a point earlier that for most people who are in education, you can't work harder, but you can work differently, and we can work differently. I think focus may be my number one hope. I think there are problems and challenges that if with substantial focus on how to, early learning, we haven't talked about this session, but early learning and early reading being crucial. On laser focus on learning curricula, how do you have high quality curricula and learning that really is able to kind of exist in a hybrid environment and where there's focus, one of the most important things given limited time. On this transition point, focus on how do you really help make sure that high school degrees, which used to be a ticket to the middle class, now is a ticket to poverty by itself. How do you make sure that high school graduation is a launching point, not a cliff? And kind of real focus on solving those issues. And look, also the issues of race have come to the fore in this country, really looking hard at the gaps for Black students and Latinx students and other underrepresented minorities and low-income students, while we're lifting all boats, how to really look at the specific issues there and make sure we're addressing those and moving opportunity forward. But I think in every school district, there's a small set of areas of focus that everyone's aligned addressing. That gives me hope that actually education can wind up being the investment that gets us not only through this pandemic and through the near-term issues of race issues that we're grappling with, but actually can be the big investment we need for our future with the help of educators working together around the country, as long as we as a country support you.
Thank you so much, and I think you lived up to the challenge. And so that's all we have time for today, unfortunately, and thank you for everyone who attended and submitted questions. We really appreciate it. And I would especially like to thank our panelists, Superintendent Ebert, Superintendent Dixon, Commissioner Johnson, and John Schnur. We're sorry if we weren't able to get to your question. Please feel free to tweet it at the Hunt Institute at Hunt_Institute with the hashtag #Homeroom, and we'll be sure to follow up. We really appreciate how engaged you are, and we look forward to providing you with more information. As I mentioned earlier, we will be posting a recording of this presentation as well as a key takeaways blog on our Hunt Institute blog later this week, so please feel free to check back for that and share with your networks. Finally, the Hunt Institute has been working really hard to compile as many resources and learning opportunities as possible during this time. And we have created a host of materials related to policy issues across the entire education continuum. We'd encourage you to check them out. The link is there at the bottom of this slide. We have 2 more webinar opportunities this month before we kind of take a brief break for the summer holidays. And then we'll start right back up in early to mid-July. So please be sure to keep an eye out for any upcoming webinar announcements because there's going to be a lot coming soon. But our last 2 for June are June 23rd from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern with Lieutenant Governors. And it's going to be Lieutenant Governor Bethany Hall-Wong from Delaware and Lieutenant Governor William Mingesser of Louisiana. And then on the 25th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have state leaders in higher education talk COVID-19 with the commissioners of higher education from Louisiana and Tennessee, as well as Kim Cook, who is the executive director of the National College Attainment Network. Closing out our last couple just housekeeping things. Once the webinar is over, you'll be brought to a brief survey asking about your experience. So if you would fill that out, that would be, we would greatly appreciate it. And all responses will be kept totally confidential. It's just for our own continuous improvement. And finally, with the name change, we have had a URL change for this webinar series. And so it's right here, hunt-institute.org/homeroom. So if you're looking for the blog and you can't find it, it's because we have changed the URL. So that is all that we have. Thank you again so much for attending. We're really looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks when we return with this series. And we also look forward to seeing you on our Lieutenant Governor webinar on June 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. Thanks so much, and everyone have a great day.